Welcome to Jazz Congress 2021. This session is Masterclass, New Orleans Drumming with Herlin Riley, and will be moderated by Adonis Rose. My name is Jake Lassini, and I'm the Senior Manager of Education and Community Programs at Jazz Lincoln Center. In order to provide everyone with a safe and positive experience, there is absolutely no recording of any portion of the session permitted. We also ask that you refrain from taking screenshots or posting sections of these classes on social media. If you'd like to ask a question to our panelists, you can leave it in the chat by hovering over and clicking on the text bubble logo in the upper right of your screen. When it comes time for the Q&A, we will ask that you please post your questions in the chat. Of course, if you have questions throughout the session, you can post them and we'll grab them. And we will address those questions towards the end of the session. Now sit back, relax, and I'm going to turn it over to Adonis Rose. Adonis, take it away. Hey.
Tell automatic slim, tell razor toting Jim, tell butcher knife toting Annie, to tell fast talking Fanny. We're gonna pitch a ball down to that old Union Hall. We're gonna rump and trump till midnight. We're gonna fuss and fight till daylight. We're gonna pitch a wang dang doodle all night long. We're gonna pitch you a wang dang doodle with you all night long. 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 We're gonna pitch you a wang dang doodle all night long. Tell Cooter, calling red. Tell Albert, seeing it. Tell old Pistol Pete. Tell everybody he meet. Tonight we don't need no rest. Really throw a mess. We're gonna knock out all of the windows. We're gonna kick down all the doors. We're gonna pitch you a wang dang doodle all night long. We're gonna pitch you wang dang doodle all night long. 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 We're gonna pitch you wang dang doodle all night long. Tell Shaking what will sound that everybody's gonna jam. Tell Frankie, box called Joe, we got sawdust on the floor. Tell Peggy, Caroline Dime, we gonna have a heck of a time. And when the fish tank fills the air, there'll be snuff juice everywhere. We're gonna picture wang dang doodle all night long. We're gonna picture wang dang doodle all night long. 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 We're gonna picture wang dang doodle all night long.
All right, all right, all right. That's Mr. Herlin Riley. Thank you. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you being here. And to everybody that's watching, my name is Adonis Rose. Thank you guys for joining us for Jazz Congress 2021. Even though we're doing it online, we're still having a great time. I am the artistic director of the New Orleans Jazz Orchestra. We're here at our venue, the New Orleans Jazz Market, and we are here to talk to the amazing Mr. Herlin Riley, who we all just enjoyed playing all night long on the drum set. We're going to talk a little bit about New Orleans music, New Orleans drummers,
Yes.
and try to get into the mind of Mr. Herlin Riley, which I've been trying to do for the past 25 to 30 years, and I still don't have it figured out.
Me either.
So thank you again, man, for being here.
Man, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
And it's a pleasure to come and share some information.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my absolute pleasure, and I'm honored to be here and to take part in this great endeavor.
Good, man. Well, I got some questions for you. When I sat down and wrote out a list of questions, I actually went on for about 45 minutes with things that I wanted to ask you. Some stuff I had to cross off the list. I couldn't ask because I knew we were going to be online. But we'll just jump right into it. And I'm sure I'm going to learn a whole lot, as will the listeners and the people who are checking us out.
I'll probably learn a lot myself.
So what part of town are you actually from in New Orleans?
I was born and raised in the Lower Ninth Ward, which is an area of town that was decimated by Hurricane Katrina. You know, it washed away the land and a lot of people that was there. Homes got washed away, but the spirit of the city, or the spirit of the culture, never got washed away inside of me. So, I was born in New Orleans, down in the Lower Ninth Ward, and I was fortunate, like you, to be born into a musical family. You know, my grandfather was a drummer. He played with Louis Armstrong back in 1913 in Waves Home, and they were in the homes together, and I had all of his sons were musicians. My uncle Melvin Lassie was a trumpet player. David Lassie played the saxophone. Walter Poppy Lassie played the drums. Yep. And my mother, she even played piano and sang gospel music in church. Mm-hmm. So I was raised in the music. Mm-hmm. I was raised in the music, and back then it was a lot of music. I had a lot of musical mentors, and it's like the old African West African tradition of the griots. Yeah. The griots, they were storytellers and they're historians. They were historians, storytellers, and also some of them were musicians and drummers who passed on information to the younger people. Mm-hmm. And so I was very, very fortunate in my formative years to be around people who were griots to me, who passed on information. Mm-hmm. And my family was definitely the primary source of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell that you picked it up from your family because you did the same for me and a lot of other New Orleans drummers and musicians around here. So, I mean, I remember a time where I would just call you, bug you all the time just to meet at any time. And I wanted to be able to get the information so bad. I remember times just showing up at your house when you would just show up off the road, home off the road, and you still would take the time to give me the information. But how old were you when you started to play the drum set?
Man, I was about 3 or 4 years old. I don't even remember. It's like, that question has always been posed to me, and it's like asking me, when did I learn to talk? Mm-hmm.
I got one even better. Drums were not your first instrument. Is that correct? Was the trumpet your first instrument?
No, the drums.
The drums
The
were.
drums was the first instrument.
So I know that you played trumpet throughout high school. Can you
Yeah.
just kind of walk me through your history a
Well,
little bit?
yeah. Well, my uncle Melvin was my greatest mentor. That was
Mm-hmm.
my very first mentor, and they had bands in the house all the time,
Mm-hmm.
practicing and rehearsing. So I heard the music firsthand, and
Mm-hmm.
so by him being my mentor, my very first real mentor, he played the trumpet, and I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be like him.
Yeah.
So when I was in about 12th grade or so, no, I'm sorry, 7th grade,
Mm-hmm.
sixth, no, I was before that. I was in elementary school, like in about 5th grade.
Mm-hmm.
He sent me a trumpet. He was in New York, and he sent me a trumpet in mud, and I got the trumpet in the case, man. And I was like, wow, I got a trumpet, man. I was just like a kid at Christmas time with a new toy. So I got this trumpet, and so I started to play the trumpet throughout and started in elementary school, and
Did you play
then
in a concert band,
I played in the concert
marching
band. I played in
bands?
the marching
Where'd
band.
you go to school?
I went to Carver High School. I
Mm-hmm.
went to Carver Senior High School, and that was under the direction of a great mentor, Miss Yvonne Bush.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yvonne Bush was a great teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and as a matter of fact, Ellis Marcellus did his student teaching under her.
Mm-hmm.
So she taught people like James Black and
Mm-hmm.
and um, George Davis, who became the musical director for Chorus Line on New York.
Mm-hmm.
She had so many. I could go on. She had a whole list of students that she taught and that she mentored.
Mm-hmm.
So I was one of the students, and I played the trumpet at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But that was, but even though I played the trumpet, I was always playing the drums. I could always play the drums.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather teaching me, I always knew how to play a press roll,
Mm-hmm.
like one of those Art Blakey press rolls. Do that. So, when I was in high school,
That's one of the hardest things to do on a drum set
that
is to
press roll, huh?
play a press roll like it. It sounds like you're tearing a sheet of paper or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, from
Baby Dodds and R. Blakey had it.
that's right. They had that, man. They had that.
Well, that's good. That's information that I definitely did not know. For some reason, I thought you started on trumpet and then
Switched
went to the
over,
drums
yeah.
and then switched over. Well, that's interesting. So, did you go to Southern? Did you study under Elvin Baptiste?
I didn't go to Southern University, but Alvin Baptiste had a program called Jazz Artists in Residence, and he would drive. Man, this man was dedicated. He would drive from Baton Rouge, which was about an hour away.
Mm-hmm.
He would drive to New Orleans twice a week
Mhm.
to mentor people who wanted to learn jazz.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just saw the drummer. He had three musicians that he always came with, and one was Henry Butler.
Yep.
And another guy Henry played the piano, and then Julius Farmer played the bass,
Mhm.
and Herman Jackson was the drummer. And so I just saw Herman, and the other day, and Herman was mentioning that all those other guys have passed away now, but Alvin Baptiste was dedicated to teaching young musicians, and he drove down twice a week from Baton Rouge to New Orleans to my high school, Carver Senior High School, and was teaching us. And then we moved to a place called Beauregard High School, which is on Canal Street. And then there was a collection of musicians who came from around town who kind of joined in and became part of that mentorship.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the first bands that you played in New Orleans? I'm familiar with your history and your career, and I'm sure there's a lot of things that I don't know about that. But can you just talk a little bit about some of your first gigs? When was your first gig? Was it in college? Was it in high school? Was it a funk gig? Were you playing, some standards? Were you playing on Bourbon Street? I mean, what was the vibe?
First gigs. Some of the first gigs I played was with Danny Barker, and he had a group called the Fairview Baptist Church Christian Band. It was a marching band of a brass band of all kids from like 8 to 18. And so we would do gigs, and he would pay us like $7 a gig or something kind of stuff like that. But it wasn't about the money; it was about learning the craft and learning the music. So that was a gig I took when I was about 13 years old.
Was Leroy Jones?
I met Leroy Jones. I met Lucian Barberin. I met Dr. Michael White. They were all in the band with me. Tuba Fats, Lacey, Lucian Barberin. They were all, we were all in the band together. And so that was one of the first gigs I did. And then I played in a band called Rock 560. There was like a garage band at the time. I was playing trumpet. And during those years, I was playing trumpet. I was really serious about trying to play the trumpet. Drums I could always do, so I wasn't focusing on the drum.
With Danny Barker, you played drums or trumpet?
I played trumpet.
You
with
played
Danny
trumpet?
Barker.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I was
All right.
playing trumpet.
All right.
With that band. And then later on, I started playing a gig on Bourbon Street, and I was subbing for the trumpet player and the drummer. it was a 7 night a week gig, and so they needed a night off. So Uncle David, who was playing across the street with Frogman Henry, playing it, he said, "Man, can you make this gig at the 500 Club? They need a drummer, and they need a horn player. So can you come? You know?" So I went and auditioned. So I auditioned and I got the gig, subbing one night on the drums, and then one night on the trumpet. And just so happened that both those guys quit at the same time. They left the band.
Did they quit or did you take the gig?
No, they quit. They quit. I wasn't there yet. I wasn't there yet. They quit. They quit. But actually, so they hired me as a drummer. This is like when I first made the real transition from the trumpet to the drums. They hired me as a drummer because I knew the routine of all the dancers, all the people. It was a burlesque show.
Oh, killer.
It was a burlesque show.
How old were you, man?
I was 18. I was like
Oh,
18.
well,
years old.
yeah, you got in. You got the
I-
real deal at
I
a
got
young
in
age.
early. I
Yeah,
got in
okay.
early.
All right.
And so I knew all the routines. So and the drummers, the drummer has to be able to play the music and also watch the dancers so that when they're making certain movements, you hit certain part of the instrument.
Right.
And so during that time, I called Wendell Brunius. Wendell Brunius was a trumpet player. I said, "Wendell, are you still playing your horn?" He said, "Yeah, man." He was working at Sears selling sporting goods and stuff. I said, "Man, come down and audition for this gig, and they'll hire you." So he came down and auditioned, and he got the gig, and he never worked another day job. So the two of us worked at the 500 Club. It was called the 500 Club on Bourbon Street for a couple of years. And then eventually I started working with this guy named Johnny Bashman.
I know Johnny. He worked at the Royal Sonesta.
That's right. As a matter
I
of fact,
played with him at the Royal Sonesta. That's
yes,
how long he was there?
yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
Well, before that, we were at the Mount Leon Hotel, and that's when I got Chris, your uncle. Chris came in and played bass with us too. So I started working with Johnny, and that was a trio gig I had. And then stuff started snowballing after that, more gigs. And then finally after that, I started working with Al Hurt. I did Al Hurt's band. And
Al Hurt was a
Hurt
bad
was a
dude,
great
man.
trumpet player.
Man.
And I worked with Al Hurt's band. And then from Al Hurt's band, I did One More Time show where I traveled to London and Australia.
Now, was Ellis Ellis played with Al Hurt? Now, was that a lot? That was before you played, or was
That was before I played.
That was before
I played with Al Hurt.
Okay.
So yeah, he had come and gone by then.
Okay.
By the time I got there. So so and then finally, soon after that, I started working with Ahmad Jamal. Ahmad Jamal called me to work with him. This is like 1982.
Wait, hold up. Let's just pause right there.
All right.
First of all, Ahmad Jamal just don't call people and ask them to come and play on the road. So I'm sure you have a story behind that. How did you get the gig with Ahmad Jamal? How did that actually happen?
Well, Ahmad Jamal. Well, first of all, he was playing at a club called the Blue Room, which is in the Roosevelt Hotel. And the Blue Room was a place where they brought in national acts, people who were national, like Lena Horne played there, and Williams, and and people like that would come and play. And they had a big band that would always, that was supportive. That was a supportive band, so they didn't have to travel with the band. So they had a big band that was a house band that was there all the time. One of the members of the house band was Emery Thompson, and he was also Muslim. His Muslim name is Umar Sharif. And so he and Ahmad had a connection because Emery lived in Chicago and Ahmad was in Chicago running the club that he had. He had a club in Chicago, so they had a connection from the Muslim thing and also from the musicianship. And so when he came to town, he asked Emery, "Well, man, who's a drummer that can perhaps make the gig with me?" And so Emery Thompson calls me up in like 7 o'clock in the morning, man. He said, "Man, Ahmad Jamal needs you." I said, "Man, come on, man. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, man. Don't play like that, man. I don't want,
Because that's big, man.
So and that's what happened, man. So he called me, and make a long story short, I jumped on the plane that very same day. During that time, you could just somebody send you a ticket, you could just go and get on the plane. Yeah. No TSA, none of that
you
stuff.
bring your drums on the plane.
Bring drums on the plane. That's right. I brought drums on the plane, everything else. And I went to Phoenix, Arizona. I flew to Phoenix, Arizona. I played. We did a rehearsal. Then I played the gig that night. After that night, he said, "Man, if you want the gig is yours."
Yeah.
So I stayed with him from 1982 to 87. I was with Ahmad Jamal. And following that, I took some time off. I did a show called, in 87, I did a show called Satchmore, America's Musical Legend. with Byron Stripling and
Yeah.
Jeff Clayton was playing the saxophone
Mm-hmm.
and a few other people. But following that gig, Winston called me,
Mm-hmm.
and that was in February of 1988.
Mm-hmm. Now, didn't you play? Didn't you play some? If I can, my memory serves me correctly, you did some things with Harry when Harry recorded on some of his records. Did
Oh
you
yeah,
ever go
yeah.
out and do?
Yeah. Well, we were working locally.
So,
We
yeah.
were just working locally around town, and we had a band called it was with Ramsey McLean.
Mhm.
It's called the Lifers.
Uh-huh.
It was called the Lifers, and Ramsey McLean was like a bass player who was like the band leader,
Mhm.
and Harry Connick played in the band, and Charmaine Neville was in the band,
Mhm.
and they had a few other people. So we were kind of like working around the city doing some gigs, mostly at Snug. It was called the Fallbrook Marigny at the time, Snug Harbor.
Uh-huh.
And so we were doing a lot of gigs, a lot of those gigs. And then it just so happened that when Harry got signed to CBS Sony,
Mhm.
I happened to do his very first record
I remember you playing on that record.
on that
So
record.
I thought
Yeah,
you played in the band, but you played on the record.
playing on the record.
I got you.
And the tune is only one tune that I played on with him, and that tune was entitled E.
Uh-huh.
And that was a tribute to Ellis Marsalis
Mhm.
at the time, and it was myself and Reginald Veal.
Uh-huh.
And so, and then that was and then I did some other things on the side with Harry later on, but nothing consistent on a
Consistent with
consistent
them.
basis.
Uh-huh. So exactly how did Winton hear about you, other than being from New Orleans and probably
now-
all the musicians here being like, man, look, you putting a band together, and you
That's
need to call.
that's an interesting story too, because I had been working with Ellis, his dad, with a guy named Teddy Riley who played the trumpet, and we were working at the Hyatt Regency Hotel on Sunday mornings doing the brunch, and so Ellis was like a side man, just playing, just in the piano chair.
Right.
And Walter Payton was playing the bass.
Yeah.
It was Nicholas Payton's father. He was playing the bass, and I was playing the drums. And so, Winston during that time had kind of exploded on the scene with Art Blakey, and Brant, So I was like, Ellis, is that your son? That's your son? He said, yeah, man, that's the guys I've been telling you about, man. One plays the trumpet and one plays the saxophone. So yeah, that's the ones who I've been telling you about. So it just so happened that I met Winston. So I didn't really know him. I'll tell you another story about that later on. I didn't really know him personally that way. And then I got to London when I was doing One More Time show in London, and he happened to come through London with Art Blakey, and they were playing at Ronnie Scott's. So after my gig after I was doing the One More Time show, so I would rush over to Ronnie Scott's after the gig and catch whoever was coming in there. So I saw all kind of people. Art Blakey, I saw Max Roach, I saw Elvin Jones, I saw Gordon, I saw and the Savoy Sultans, so many bands that was coming through. Betty Carter, so many people. So it just so happened that I wanted to see Art Blakey. I mean, I couldn't wait to go see Art Blakey, and Winston playing with him. So Winston, at the end of the show, I went up and I said hello to Winston, and he, we met each other as men at that time, and he introduced me to Art Blakey and that kind of thing. And so later on, I was playing at Fat Tuesdays in New York with Ahmad Jamal. Later on, that was a few years later. And he came in and heard me playing with Ahmad Jamal, and I was playing a totally different style than I played with the One More Time show.
And for him, he was really young when he played with Blakey, so he had already, went through, playing with Herbie and that all-star band. He had his band, his quartet.
That's right.
So he had went through a few bands by the time to this point.
That's right. That's right. So he heard me playing a different kind of style. He heard me playing with the One More Time. So just to have faith had it is that a few years later, Jeff Tain Watts left the band, and Winston called me to come in and play with him. So I stayed with him for 17 years after that.
Yeah, I know y'all did some incredible. I mean, probably over 30 or 40 over 30 records, I'm sure.
Yeah, a lot of records.
Which I listened to all of them. I try to steal everything you ever played. So that's amazing, man. So I didn't know how you got the gig with Winston.
But I want to go back a little bit. Winston and I, we used to talk about playing with Danny Barker. And I told you Danny Barker, the Fairview band was a band of all kids. And so when we were on the road together, he said, "Man, were you ever in the Fairview band?" I said, "Yeah, I was in the Fairview band." He said, "I was in the Fairview band too." I said, "Man, I never saw you there." He said, "I never saw you either."
Well, you guys
So
have a little gap in age,
yeah,
right?
well,
So
yeah,
he's
I'm about 4 years older than
yeah,
Winton.
yeah, yeah.
About 4 years old. So someone came up with a picture, and the picture has Winton playing and me. We're standing side by side, and I must be about, I guess I'm about 14, and Winton is about 10.
But y'all didn't remember that.
We didn't remember that.
Oh man,
And so the picture showed up, and there it was in black and white, proof that we
full
were there. We
circle.
were there together.
Came full circle.
That's right.
Oh
That's
man,
right.
that's good.
But I didn't know him. I didn't know Winton as then. I mean, because 14 and 10 that's a big gap.
yeah,
So you don't,
yeah.
as a 14, you're not associating with the
Right,
youngsters, that
right.
kind of thing. But so when we got to London, we met and introduced each other as men. As men, we met each other as men. And right now, man, Winton is my dearest friend. We don't talk all the time, but he's like my brother, man. He's my
Y'all
little
spend
brother.
so much time together, man.
We have
I've seen
we have
this
we have a
years.
beautiful relationship, man. Just
Yeah.
just a beautiful relationship.
Yeah, well, look, I want to hear more about your personal story, but I want to talk a little bit about the drums.
All right.
And just find out from you outside of your family. I knew when you were coming up. I mean, you had a bunch of cats around. You had Ed Blackwell, you had James Black, and Bob French was around. Who were some of the guys that were like your biggest influences just coming up as a drummer? Who was the guy you was like, okay, if there's a guy in New Orleans, I want to play like this guy.
Well, I got to admit, my uncle Walter Poppy Lassie was my greatest mentor because I was around him all the time. He was showing me stuff all the time, and then he was always talking about James Black. And so when I got to see James Black play, I was like, man, that guy's phenomenal. I want to be able to do some of the stuff that he's doing because James played with so he had such a mathematical mind. He could, he would say all the music is in two. Say, well, man, what about 7/4?
Right.
We say 7/4 is just two bars of two bars of seven played slowly.
Right.
That kind of stuff, man. So he would always play in a way that he was always reshaping the music and always playing all these juxtaposing all of these polyrhythms on top of the music, but he always knew where one was.
Yeah.
He always knew where he was in the form. And so listening to him play, I would be confused because I didn't know where he was at, where he was. But then he would always come back and hit one and bring the music back into that cohesiveness. So he was definitely one of my greatest influence around New Orleans. But also Smokey Johnson.
Yeah.
Because Smokey Johnson played with such a relaxing feeling and but with power and intensity. So Smokey and and then I used to sneak by Preservation Hall and watch Cy Frazier play. I used to stand in the window and look at him playing. And so all these men to me were griots.
Yeah.
Because they had information and they told the story and they shared the information verbally, but also watching them and checking out how they played and learning the language of what they played.
Yeah.
And I'm like that today. I listen to everybody who played. Everybody has something to say.
Yeah.
Especially when it's coming from a place of honesty and truth.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are trying to be generic and playing somebody else's style and and it's not true. I said I don't like. I'd rather hear somebody coming from their own gut and their own spirit inside them, no matter how bad it may be. It's still with that honesty.
Right.
They have something to say.
Yeah.
And I listen to I listen to everybody. I listen to you. I listen to Joe Dyson.
Yep.
Listen to Shannon Powell.
Yep.
I listen to everybody, man.
Yeah.
Everybody who's got something to say on the drums. I'm there to listen because one of the greatest things I think as a musician is to have the humility and confidence.
Yeah.
The humility allows you to always be able to receive information.
Yeah.
And to digest it and to realize that you don't know everything. But the confidence allows you to stand tall and have ownership of what you're doing.
Yeah.
To stand on the stage, be on stage and be in front of people and to stand there boldly.
Right.
Boldly
Right.
you know, so but it has to be a balance.
Yeah.
It can't be.
Okay. Yeah.
It
That's
has
true.
to be a balance. Too much confidence
Yeah. Yeah.
goes over into that
Yeah.
ego thing.
Exactly.
Too much confidence and too much humility becomes like, low self-esteem.
Yeah.
And I can't do it.
Right.
That's too.
Well,
No.
you can't push the music forward if you don't have enough confidence. And for me, growing up as a drummer, watching you and watching, cats like Shannon, I mean, for me, you guys were the modern drummers. You guys were the example for me. I was, so I was like, okay, well, I want to play like Herlin. And one of the things that attracted me so much to your playing is that you could you were so versatile that you could fit in almost any situation. And then when I started doing kind of filling in for you with Jazz at Lincoln Center and doing things with Winton, those times when you were there, he would kind of bring me there and we would be there together. So I could sit behind the drum set and learn from you. So, actually the first time, I'm running a big band now, but I learned everything about playing drum set, playing behind a big band from you.
Oh man.
And just all of those years, just sitting behind you and watching you play the drums. So I want to kind of talk to you about some of the things that I actually learned. We talked about playing those press rolls and dealing with the history of the drum set. Whenever I saw you play the drum set, it was always a history lesson. And it was, working with Winton in the orchestra, I guess it worked hand in hand because you guys were dealing with the music and starting out really early. You were dealing with Jelly Roll's music. You were dealing with Pops's music. You would, Duke Ellington and Monk, and you just kind of just went along with the evolution of the music chronologically. But whenever I saw you, I got a history lesson. So I want to talk a little bit just about early drumming. And I know really in the early stages of the music, we had the marching bands, the brass bands, but I want to talk about the evolution of the drum set and how it went from John Philip Sousa's band to brass bands, the first brass bands, but then to talk about the people who took it from the streets and brought it into the nightclubs.
Yeah.
And we sent some text messages a little bit earlier about some of the guys who started experimenting with the drum set, and it was funny that you brought up the fact that you started out kind of working in a burlesque burlesque kind of situation, a musical situation like that, because way back in the day, that actually just playing with those shows influenced the music and actually pushed it to go to where the orchestras needed to save some money. They didn't really have money, so they needed one drummer to kind of fill the space for two or three drummers. So can you just talk a little bit just about the history? I know we talked about Dee Dee Chandler a little bit earlier and Baby Dodds.
Well, yeah, Dee Dee Chandler and John Robichaux, they're the people who got together and really invented the foot pedal. And as you talked about in the brass bands, where they had two or maybe sometimes three guys who played the role of the drummer. So you had a bass drum player who just plays strictly bass drum, and sometimes you have a guy who played the cymbals by itself, and also a snare drum player. So, and then as that kind of got modified with the bass drum, adding the cymbal to the top of the bass drum. So, and that eliminated one guy who just played the clash cymbals.
Right.
And so later on, Dee Dee Chandler also played the trumpet. And so Dee Dee Chandler and John Robichaux, they were the drummers who played in the brass band. And so so when the music kind of started coming inside into the speakeasies instead of playing on the street all the time, so they modified. So Dee was like, man, I'm playing my horn tonight, man. So we got to figure out a way that you can play these drums by yourself. So they came up with an invention of the foot pedal. And the foot pedal, it was a full floorboard with a beater attached to it to the floorboard that was on a spring that you could I think they had a rope or something in the middle of it that you could tie on. It was tied to the base, to the full floorboard, and you could hit it and the spring would retract it, and then you could hit it again, the spring would retract. So that was the central key component to what we now know as a drum set. Because the core of a drum set is the bass drum, snare drum, and the cymbals.
Yep.
And that's what I learned to play on, because when I played in church with my grandfather, when I was playing in church as a boy, that's all my grandfather had. All he had was a bass drum, snare drum, and cymbal. And we could play anything that you want to play with those three.
You got
Yeah.
it, right?
And so with the invention of the bass drum, of the foot pedal, that changed the whole direction of a drummer, and the whole perception of what a drummer had needed to do. And so now one guy could fill in the job of three.
Yeah.
Because now it's compact now. And so with the foot pedal, and so now we have drum sets all over the world. That's something that can be attributed to New Orleans, the concept of a drum set. That's an American invention.
Yep.
It's an American invention, the drum set,
Yeah.
just in that foot pedal. And so now all the extra instruments, and later on, like in the 30s, Baby Doll was playing on a steamboat up and down the river on a ship, on a steamboat, playing concerts, and because a lot of musicians did that. And he was patting his left foot while he was playing the bass drum with the right foot. He's patting his left foot. He's rocking it back and forth. And while he was doing that, the story has it that Ludwig, the guy who made Ludwig drums, saw Baby Doll doing that, and he invented what is called the low boy. The low boy. And so the low boy was a low version of the hi hat, which we now know as the hi hat. It was close to the ground. It was two cymbals that came together. And it had a spring contraption in the middle of it, where it would kind of snap together, and the spring would let it retract, and that was a low boy.
Wasn't it Baby Dodd's idea to raise the little boy to the hi-hat? Most people don't know. I think it was his idea because he wanted it to be easier to play. He went to William Ludwig and was like, well, can you raise it up?
Yeah.
So where it can be easier for me to be able to access it.
That's right.
It wasn't some invention that some drum maker came up with.
No,
it was
no.
the drummers who.
It was a drum.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a drum. It was out of necessity because he wanted to do, be able to do something else. Being able to reach it and play it, and also be able to strike it with the sticks. And so that came in around the 30s or so. And then then you look at in the 30s you see Sonny Greer who's playing with Duke Ellington. Sonny Greer had an elaborate set of drums where he used these Chinese tom-toms. The Chinese had these tom-toms. And I think Japan also, the taiko drums.
Yeah.
But the smaller versions, the small ones.
Yep.
And he would attach those to the drum set. And
I saw pictures of that. This is very interesting. This is the way it looks.
Yeah. And so, man, and these guys, man, were thinkers and inventors. And using stuff that you commonly would kind of discard, but they use it in a musical way, and that's part of the challenge that we have today, to take things that we have around and make music out of it. There was a group of musicians called back in around the turn of from the 18th to the 19th century, and they called the spasm bands. And the spasm bands took all kind of household goods, the washboards, the mason jugs. They used combs with put paper in the combs and blow them. They used like a foot tub for the bass. Where they had a foot tub with a broom handle attached to it with a string that was attached, and they would use that as a bass. Doom, 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 doom. So they made up all kind of contraptions, all kind of household things to make music with, and that was the spasm bands.
The spasm bands.
The spasm bands.
Oh man, history lesson right there. Let's talk a little bit about the New Orleans street beat, because the way we approach New Orleans music, especially behind the drums, there's so many ways to play New Orleans music. There's just not one version of the street beat.
Right.
But just for conversational purposes, let's just talk about a very basic form of the street beat, and maybe you can play an example of what that sounds like.
Yeah, I'll do that. The street beat is something that I really learned. I didn't know it as a street beat when I was learning it. It's what my grandfather taught me. And as I said earlier, my grandfather played with Louis Armstrong and Wace Home. So he was from that era. So he was from the era of Baby Dodds, and and so that was a certain style of drumming that was being played back then. And so the street beat that traditionally speaking is comprised of a lot of press roll, and so that being said, um, how my grandfather and Saeed Frazier and a lot of those older drummers, they didn't grip the left hand like so. They grip the left hand like this, where they just place the stick over the fingers at the end, which allowed them to play with more finesse and more roll. So when my grandfather was teaching me, this is what he taught me at the table. And that's one version. That's the earliest version that I can think of. And then I think later on this kind of became more open. So, and if you notice that, if you notice that, it has a what we call the big four. The big four is in the snare drum, it's just like it's in the bass drum. And so, I didn't give you the bass drum pattern.
I was waiting.
All right, all right, all right, all right.
I knew you was gonna get to some other stuff, so I ain't rushing.
So the bass drum pattern is very simple. It's based on a march. So you play 1 3 1 3 4 1. So that's the big four. So it's a 2-bar pattern. 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. So the bass drum is playing like a march. So it's 1 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1. So when you put those two together, you have this. All right, and so, given the bass drum pattern, then the bass drum would always have the cymbal attached to the bass drum. So the hi hat, I'll just play a version of that with the hi hat, and I'll put all three together. So the hi hat will play on 2 and 4. 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4.
That's very interesting. So it brings me to my next question.
All right.
So we know the street beat essentially came from military marches,
Yes.
but military marches weren't really improvised.
No.
So with that particular march that you just played, you improvise. It's almost like you're improvising. Almost every other time you come up with something really special to end phrases or 2-bar phrases or 4-bar
Well,
phrases.
that came from what the drummers around New Orleans were doing. Because being in New Orleans, we had Congo Square, and Congo Square, for those of you who don't know, was a place in New Orleans where the drummers were. It was the only place in North America where African slaves was enslaved people were able to have drums, and with the drums. You play all these patterns and you play syncopations and you have these dances and all this stuff, and so the African drum is never like a military march where you just playing everything is just straight like a martial band or something like. No,
Right.
the African drumming is syncopated and it's improvisatory and it has a lot of stuff going on inside of it, but it's still steady. It's a steady pulse and steady groove that's happening, but it's not so strict. It's not so defined. It's not so
Right.
So that being said, um, a lot of the music it was influenced. A lot of the early New Orleans music was influenced by the John Philip Sousa bands and those kind of bands, the march bands. But when the African, the black people got it, the drummers got it, they started putting that extra that four, that big four,
Yeah.
just the big four in the music. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So
Right.
just that four, that's syncopation right there because it's unexpected. Syncopation is an unexpected pulse that happens that kind of give you a jolt, a jerk or something. And so just that big four, the big four was a syncopation that came into the march. And so that syncopation, when it happened, you started finding other ways to be syncopated
Yeah.
while still keeping the steady tempo of the march.
Yeah.
So
It's a beautiful thing, man.
yes, it is.
It's a beautiful thing. I wish we had more time, man. I wish we had more time, and now we got to do the question and answer. But thank you for that example of the New Orleans street beat and the explanation. I think, well, I got a lot from it, though I'm sure the people watching did also. So we're going to take some question and answers right now. Well, some questions, and we'll give some answers. We'll let you give some answers.
All right.
Yeah, we actually had one question was kind of gets to what you were just getting at. It's from Max, and they're asking. Well, first they say, "Hey, Herlin, you were the master of a million grooves. How much is improvised, and how much is standard New Orleans grooves that you sat down and learned over time?"
I think I can hardly hear you, but I think what you're asking is how much of it is improvised and how much of it is strict. Um, well, you know, jazz music is a living, breathing art form, and you're always in a moment. So you're always in a moment. So once you have your parameters, then you can improvise. You improvise inside of those parameters. You know, there are certain you don't want to step outside of bounds. I wouldn't play a street beat and just start swinging. You know and I'm supposed to be playing a street beat. I'm going to play something that's related to that street beat, and even though I may improvise, I may do something that's maybe out of the ordinary, but it will still be within parameters of in the context of that particular style. So I think improvisation is part of at the core of playing this music and really playing jazz music. It's the core of it, improvisation. And so but still there's an interesting thing that improvisation is freedom, but it's also within a form, within the context of a form. So it's like two opposites that's meeting together: freedom and form, freedom and being in a box or being in a form. So it is a lot of it is improvisatory, but it's also within the context of what you're doing.
Next question.
So we're still waiting for a couple more questions to come in. But Herlin, you mentioned that your grandfather played with Lewis at the Waifs home. Are there any stories that have like trickled down from that time?
Well, he just always said that Lewis was a special cat, and in that Louis Armstrong he always just told me that he was a special cat. And when I asked him, I said, "Well, why were you in?" He said, "Well, I knew Louis Armstrong was in the Waste Homes shooting a gun um, on the 4th of July, and that kind of." So I asked my grandfather, I said, "Well, why were you in the Waste Home?" He said, "I got into a fight and I hit somebody in the mouth with a brick." So so they put him in the homes for that. So, but so they were just being kids, man. Kids being kids, and at 12 and 13 years old, they just had, they were just playing, and Mr. Peter Davis was around them and was teaching them the music. And actually, music is one of those things that really helps kids with discipline and helps them to become focused. And through the music, they became more focused and more. And it still works even to this day. There's a guy who lives here in New Orleans. His name is Derek Tabs. He has a group called The Roots of Music, and what he does, man, he has a program where he takes these kids and he mentors them, in a brass band tradition, and he also gives them after school, helps them with their homework and helps them with, with tutoring and all those. So, but at the core of that is the music. The music is what attracts them and brings them in. So, music is one of those things really, really helpful in helping a child to develop discipline and to develop their mind, and then to see things in another kind of way as opposed to just always, you know, black and white or whatever, you know. So, I don't know.
All right, so we got another question about the tambourine. How did tambourine evolve from church music into more groove-based music that's so common in New Orleans?
I think he said, how did the tambourine evolve, and how did it go from church music to being, played in kind of more secular music?
Okay. Well, the tambourine has been around for years and years, for centuries, really, and it was just in different forms. It just so happened that here in New Orleans, in the gospel church, I grew up playing in a spiritual church, and I saw people playing the tambourine as a kid all my life. Those sisters, man, they could whip the tambourine, man. They could play it. They were really, could play, really, really play. And so I saw them playing. But also here in New Orleans, we have what we call the Mardi Gras Indians, whereby these black cats, these black guys in different neighborhoods have these tribes, these Indian tribes, and they come out on Mardi Gras Day where they sew these elaborate costumes and with plumes and beads and feathers and and they have these Indian songs that they have, these chant songs, and a lot of the songs are call and response. Most, I guess, all of the songs are call and response songs, and they have these percussion instruments. They beat on cowbells. They play on pipes. They use bottle tops, and they had a bass drum. They play a bass drum and flip it over, and they turn the bass drum over and play it with two hands. With two sticks. And also, but one of the instruments that they use is a tambourine, and they play the tambourine, and that's played a different kind of way. The tambourine also comes, in Brazil they call it the pandera, and that's played. They play that a totally different kind of way, playing the pandera. So, getting back to your story, to your question is that I played when I was a boy growing up and being in the church. I watched the sisters play the tambourine, and I wanted to learn how to do that. So I grabbed the tambourine and learned how to play it. So when Winston called me to play in the band with him, he said, "Man, bring everything you got. Bring everything you got." So tambourine was one of the things I had. So I had a tambourine, I had cowbells, I had a gong, I had clackers, and I had a washboard. I brought all kinds of things to the gig, and so. Winston began to write music for me that featured me playing the tambourine. And one of the tunes is from Blood on the Field. It's called God Don't Like Ugly, that Cassandra Wilson is singing on. He wrote another song with the Marciac Suite called Sunflower, that I'm playing tambourine on. So, Sunflower's in 5. It's playing tambourine in 5. So I have to take the credit a little bit for bringing the tambourine to the modern jazz front. I got to take a little bit of that credit, because of Winton, and because of Winton writing the music that featured me playing the tambourine, and as a result, now there's a lot of musicians now who are using the tambourine in that way. I look at Joe Saylor, who plays with John Baptiste on the Colbert Show. He came around to Lincoln Center and was checking me out playing the tambourine, and he started doing it. So, he's playing the tambourine, and it's become a thing for him now too. And so I got to take a little bit of that credit, and it's because of Winston's vision and Winston's his foresight for having musicians be themselves and bring all of their creative energy to the music. And he was able to, like Duke Ellington, channel that energy into something and create something that came from that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This question is from Jonathan, and they would like to know if you could talk about the influence of Edward Blackwell.
The influence of Ed Blackwell.
Oh, influence of Ed Blackwell. Ed Blackwell was one of the most amazing drummers, and he had a particular sound that I think Ed Blackwell he went to West Africa, and so the tuning of his drums didn't sound like any other person's drums. They always sound like hand drums. Even though he played them with sticks, it always sounds like hand drums, and so the sound of his drums were very, very influential in that his approach to playing was so was like really I for any other African based, for lack of any other kind of word I could put to it. It was African based, and I heard him playing with Ornette Coleman, with Don Cherry, and the stuff that he was doing with that with them was like sound like African drums to me. And so just hearing him play his Ed Blackwell sound was different than any other drummer I've ever heard before or since.
All right, well, we got about 4 minutes left. Adonis, do you want to any final remarks, final questions, or we can close it out? Herlin.
Well, I mean, we could always just ask Herlin to play some more. We could always do that. But I would like to ask you another question.
Okay.
So you're not just a drummer. You're not just a person that accompanies other bands. You're a band leader. You write music, and you've been doing that for a while now. When did you do your first recording as a leader?
I did my first recording as a leader back, I think, around 2000, and it was recorded on the Crisscross record label, and it just so happened that I was with Winston during the time, and Rodney Whitaker was also playing the bass with us at the time, and I told Rodney, I said, man, I want to record, man. He said, man, I can get you a deal, man. So Rodney called this guy, Jerry Teekins, who has Crisscross Records. He's in the Netherlands. And so, Terry, he took a listen to me and said, yeah, okay, you can record. So when I recorded, I didn't want to record covers. I didn't want to record, I wanted to record my own music. So I took my time, and because I play the trumpet, I have a little bit of musical knowledge to put, a little form together and little harmonies and that kind of stuff. So I recorded that very first record about 2000, and all the music is original music original tunes on it. I think I used one of Victor's tunes as a ballad or something like that. But
what was the name of that record?
Watch What You're Doing.
Watch What You're Doing. I love that tune too.
Watch What You're Doing. Yeah.
Is Wycliffe on that record?
Wycliffe is on.
Yeah.
It was I think I had Wycliffe, Ryan Kaiser played a couple tunes on it. Fareed Barron played the piano, and Rodney Whitaker, myself.
So that was your first one, and then
that
your next
was
one was Crescent.
Cream of the Crescent.
Cream of the Crescent.
And then I got Winston to play on that one with me.
That was a great record.
Winston played on that one with me. A couple of tunes, not the whole thing. And also Victor. Victor. I think Victor's on all of my. Oh no, he's just on those. He's on those two.
What about your last record on Mack Avenue?
Oh, my last record on Mack Avenue, it did very well on the charts, man. It got to #1 on the charts for a minute. And it's called Perpetual Optimism.
Yeah.
And it's
what does that mean?
Well, always look and see the light, as opposed to seeing the darkness and looking at darkness. We just came out of a dark period.
Yeah.
With this pandemic. Well, we're not quite out of it yet. We're not all. We can see the light now at the end of the tunnel. But even during that time, I was always optimistic that it's going to get better.
Yeah.
And I try to live in that with that state of mind that whatever's going on that's challenging, or that may seem dark at the time, I look to the light. I look to the light. I know that it's going to be better. And so I want to live like that.
Yeah.
Perpetually optimistic.
Yeah, that's a great record too, man. And look, I was listening to it this morning before I came here, and I love the record. But I would like to thank you again for coming out and doing this and being a part of Jazz Congress this year. I'm happy to be able to sit down here with you and have a conversation and find out more about your life, your career, how you got started, and just a bunch of things that I didn't know before getting here today. So, Mr. Herlin Riley,
thank you all so much.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Adonis, and
Thank
thank you all for having me to participate in this Jazz Congress conversation. I appreciate you all, and much love to y'all. And keep on grooving and swinging, everybody.
Thank you, Adonis. Thank you, Herlin. Thank you so much for everyone for tuning in to today's session. As you can tell, that's all the time we have for today. We hope you'll join us for the next round of sessions tomorrow using the main link from your welcome email. Thank you once again, Herlin and Adonis. This was great. Hope to see you all down there in New Orleans very soon. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you, man.
Thank y'all. Bye-bye.